Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Embodiment Conference, yet another session. I hope you've been enjoying all of the sessions so far. My name's Kelly Bannister, and I'm going to be your host today. And today I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Martha Eddy. And her topic today is Calming the Nervous System, a Dynamic Embodiment Approach. And so she's just getting herself ready there, and I'm just going to read a little bit of a bio so you can get to know a little bit more about her. Dr. Eddy is founder and director of the Center for Kinesthetic Education in New York City. She brings her strong belief in the power of movement and somatic awareness to enhance lives into the fields of health, wellness, and education. She's highly educated. She has a bachelor's degree in dance education, a master of arts in applied physiology, a doctorate in movement science and education, and she's been an adjunct professor and a research associate and has had many positions in a number of different colleges and universities and organizations. She has, and there's too many to list, I have to say, but you can check out her website and her links. She says that through the power of physical movement, she's found that any person or group can become better at feeling life's satisfactions, embody peace, and contribute to creating stronger and happier communities. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Martha Eddy and welcome her and everyone to the call, Calming the Nervous System, a Dynamic Embodiment Approach. Over to you, Martha.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm not seeing myself, but maybe that's just as well. Hi, everyone. I'm doing my best to scan through the group. And I just want to share with you, if you don't mind, that I have company with me in live space. And this is our studio here in New York City. Laura Ward is also with us. So I have a question for you all, and it could be helpful to just use these kind of signals, thumbs up, thumbs down, to find out, for instance, and I will have to scan 2 pages worth of video of you all, you're on 2 different pages, whether or not you want to go straight into resources for calming the nervous system, or whether it might be useful to even look at why we need to calm the nervous system. So I bring that up because I'm very invested. And if you want to sit over here, I can look at you more. I'm very invested in what is called social somatics. So social somatics is basically how do we use body awareness and embodiment, somatic awareness, for social good, whether it's social change, social activism, social service, anywhere on that continuum. So when I think about my own need for calming my nervous system, it started even as a youngster, actually. Quite honestly, I grew up in the inner city on what the New York Times called the worst block in New York, meaning that there was a lot of gang warfare. We had a joke as kids that we always got a new car every 3 years. That was just like a philosophy my father had with trade-ins, thinking it was very cool. But always within the first 3 months, there was a bullet in our car. Someone just shot it usually for fun, but sometimes it could have been because it was the middle of some kind of little shootout. So it took me a while to realize that one of the reasons I got into embodiment and somatic awareness so deeply was because I had my own healing I needed to do, a real need to calm my own nervous system. And my own daughter, who's 21, would attest to that. When I get angry, I get really angry. And I'm not totally opposed to that because I think it's anger that fuels social action as well. That's been my experience with the work I've gotten into with conflict resolution and with violence prevention, which was the kind of center point of my doctoral research. How can we use movement and embodiment to bring more peace to the world, or literally to learn more about reducing personal violence and interpersonal violence. At this stage in my life, I'm also working on writing a book about why my parents chose as white people to live in a Black and Puerto Rican neighborhood in the 1940s. So that's before the civil rights movement had even really taken off. And so I'm reading a lot about white supremacy. And I'm very aware that generally the somatic and embodiment field is predominantly white. And yet I also am very aware, having grown up with a Black community and with a Latino community, that maybe it's partially because my Black and Puerto Rican friends are incredibly embodied and still inside their rhythm and inside their sensuality and sexuality and inside a lot of movement expression that's less evident for those of us, myself very much included, coming more from a Anglo-Saxon, if not even in my case, Puritan background. So these all interest me, how we get to where we go. So if there's a little interest, I can talk maybe 10 more minutes about some of the puzzles we're dealing with in our society that are important to me, that are influencing my work. Is that of interest? I need to see thumbs or not? Yeah, okay, let me just go to page 2. Am I seeing any thumbs? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna share, first I'll pull it up, a PowerPoint, and I'm gonna breeze through it. I just wrote it recently for talking to 20-year-olds in a college, and then I obviously adapted it for you all. Looks like I have to go through this stage of putting it on before I can go to screen. There we go, play from the start. So if you want to come over here, now you can. So the theme of that one was somatic practices and social justice, and I will define the word somatics. So here's somatic, the body-mind connection, would be a quick way to talk about it. But really, why the word somatic? Because the word soma in Greek, and still today in Greece, means the living body. So that means the body that is capable of healing itself, the body that self-regulates, the body that is alive and intelligent, the whole notion of body wisdom. And so as an embodiment practice, to be able to use somatic education, which is about learning to pay attention to your body and body cues in order to inform the mind. And we have a lot of tools we use: breath, movement, touch, vocalization, which can be singing, but it can also be just humming, oming, vibration, shaking, and conscious movement. This is interesting. Conscious dialogue is what I talk about, like bringing the bodily experience to language. So yeah, I've got a doctorate. I'm more intellectual than a lot of people. I wrote this book, which I guess I have to unshare. I'm going to stop the share for a second so you can see. I think you can see this. So this is called Mindful Movement. It took 15 years for me to write about this field. So with that, I love language. I think it's really important. And I think it brings us to consciousness. So I call the verbal part of my work conscious dialogue. So here we go again. Oh, there we go. Are you able to see at the same time that I, what did I do? There we go, share. There we are, okay. So I'm gonna go on, hopefully, to the next slide. The other point that I like to make is that the type of movement that most of my studies have been in are called neurodevelopmental. So we're looking at how babies learn to move and how our early history in movement informs our behavior and informs our posture and our movement today. So it's really a rich history we hold in our bodies. Now, for some reason, I'm not able to go forward. So yeah, we'll try that. Very good, thank you. So here's a baby who lives in London with a Brazilian mom and a British dad. And I'm going to go back to just what we're saying there. You know, why do somatic education? Why do embodiment? Well, to improve our posture. I mean, very straightforward, to enhance coordination, to overcome pain, to heal from injury and trauma, to break negative habits, which could be exhaustion, and to create better ones, but also to change our minds, to think differently. And then how does that relate to social justice? Well, the body is inside injustice, is really what I feel. There's bodily oppression, there's humiliation, there's violence, and all of that has a psychophysical component. And marginalization is often based on body attributes, skin color, lack of limbs, lack of motor ability. And then that impacts a sense of worthiness or creates senses of disenfranchisement. So why go to the body? Because that's where we can heal and we can reclaim our physical, psychophysical power. It's also a place where physically we can learn to kind of be, thank you, with dignity. So whether, you know, if there's a sense of shame, sometimes we get more concave, we get more hidden. And so one of the things we're going to play with today is our spinal tone, the tonus of the spine. Being hyperextended can be related to being overextended with foci, and it can also be about really just maybe being very arrogant. So how we carry ourselves has a lot of different moods in it. And there's no one mood, and I really don't believe in reading body language or posture in any one way. It's really about investigating. And I speak always from the experience, two different experiences. The experience of what is happening in my own body, what am I feeling? And then that is also informing and causing bias in me around what am I picking up from other people. So I love the somatic work because with the process of becoming more subtle in my embodiment, I do feel that I'm picking up on the cues of other people. But the conflict resolution work really taught me not to assume that what I see and then interpret is accurate. It's just a jumping off point for dialogue. So back to that idea of conscious dialogue. And one of the things that the Laban work in particular, which really informs my dynamic embodiment approach, has to do with how we use our bodies even in making decisions, how to decide what to do and when to do it. So there's a lot of information there that can inform being rageful or doing nonviolent interaction or just taking care of ourselves. So I'm just going to do 2 or 3 more slides just to get in there. I also make a big distinction between mind-body and body-mind. So the mind-body thing has been talked about for decades. I used to study Aikido, and that was considered a mind-body discipline. And I appreciated that because it actually was a very physical mind-body discipline. But there was this idea that you must control your body with your mind, learn to strengthen your intentionality, strengthen your sense of the world, strengthen who the attacker might, you know, your awareness of who the attacker might be. Whereas the body-mind, and this is related to calming the nervous system, there's this idea, and it's true, that we can use our cortical mind, our cerebral hemispheres, our frontal lobe, to tell a different story and to calm ourselves. And that's a great thing. And that can be very controlling and very top-down at times. So one of the things that I like to talk about that I mention in, and actually more than mention, right, a couple chapters on in Mindful Movement, is that the early somatic work was very much about healing the body and gaining new capacity of body-mind connection, of thinking differently, as I mentioned before, of creativity emerging from having more physical choices. As I'm able to do more complex movement, my mind is like the dendrites, the nervous system is awakening to more possibilities. The other thing that happens when you follow your body isn't always cortical. It can be very subcortical. It can be very limbic. In other words, our bodies, and you've all heard this idea that there's muscle memory, cellular memory. Once we tap into the body as the source of information, or if we're overloaded with our body, get a stimulus that goes into our adrenal system, which is when we usually need to calm down our nervous system, that body knowledge is actually often quite emotional. And yet it's based in sensation. So if we can track the sensation and be with the sensation, and then use our cortical mind, our heart sensing, our emotional life to kind of go with, what do I want? One can find a kind of equanimity from that. So just to reiterate, the body-mind isn't just about using the mind to control the body, but the body-mind is allowing whatever is living inside of us to have expression. And I created a kind of pathway that we could explore in another workshop sometime called EGIC. It's just a weird acronym. E is for express. G is for ground. I is for integrating integrity, which is what I mean by connecting with your heart and your desire. And C is then communicating it. Because what good is knowing what you want if you actually don't share it and do something with that desire? It can feel very isolating. So again, the EGIC, tonight we're going to focus on the grounding. So I'm going to assume that you each know what's going on for yourself. And that may not be true. Sometimes I had years where I just felt weird and I had no idea what my emotional life was about. I was such a wasp. I didn't know I had a feeling. I was just resentful and starting to manipulate things. You learn to be what we call passive aggressive, right? So instead, I want to know what I'm feeling, ground myself so that I'm not just reactive, but that I'm in touch with my feelings and then find what I really want from those feelings. We won't go as deep into all of that today, but we will play for the next half hour with the spinal tonus, the breath, and some early movement patterns from neurodevelopmental experience that can be useful in calming the nervous system. So I'm going to jump to a slide that's new and hot off the press for me, which I created when I was going to be talking for ISMETA, which is our professional association, the International Somatic Movement Education and Therapy Association. And these are principles of somatic education that I deduced from doing cross-case analysis for 10 years, actually 20 years of experiential learning and then 10 years of book research. What is endemic? What is similar in all somatic movement systems? Well, there's something about slowing down to feel. So there's lots of ways to do embodiment. 5 rhythms, you get into lots of different rhythms and you feel different feelings. That's a great way. This is a little different. This is about slowing down to get to sensation. Finding breath support, that basic signal that you're alive, that we're alive, we breathe. And often when that's slowing down, it's helpful to lie down, to release tension, to let go of what we've been holding on to. And that's that grounding that I've been referring to. And then once we get there, we want to explore our full-bodiedness, not just our frontal orientation towards doing or towards protecting, but also our back space, also our sides, also our feet and the top of our head, every part of the body, the full 3-dimensionality. And again, that's very Laban influence, but as it turns out, in my training, we work with the scales. Some of you may have been with Karen Studd today, where you really found your shaping and your 3-dimensionality. Well, it's opening up options. I can be forward, I can be back, I can go to the side, I can open to outward, I can really ascend and I can descend. And there are different feeling states that go with that and reasons to explore those places. And then the other thing that all these 40 different somatic movement systems, which includes Alexander technique and Feldenkrais and Skinner releasing and Mabel Todd's ideokinesis work and lots of other embodiment practices, is that you try new things, you experiment, you dare to do something different, break a habit. So how do we do that? Well, we have to be not only aware of our bodies, but kind of aware of this. These two slides are just about the importance of breath and the importance of rest. And then here we have these 40 different somatic systems. You may recognize ones that you've been influenced by or that you've heard of or that you're interested in. I'll give you a moment with that one. The brown is the first generation, the early influencers, Traeger, Charlotte Selvar's sensory awareness. Way over here, we've got Gerda Alexander and Ida Rolf. I've mentioned the others, and my teacher, who I studied with directly, Irmgard Bartiniev, who had been a student of Laban's, a dancer, but also couldn't find work, so became a healer, a physical therapist, and then later an emotional healer, a dance movement therapist. So, and this is somatic movement, but there's also somatic psychology and somatic body work. So we do a lot of touch, and then some of us do psychophysical work for sure, but often we need to refer to somatic psychologists, people trained in the psychodynamic process. I'm going to skip a bunch of slides, and we can come back to them in the question area. And I just want to show you this slide, which is what I created in thinking about how important, actually, Steve Paxton kind of influenced this in me. He's the founder. Yeah, it's great. We can bring our hands up. He's the founder of Contact Improvisation. And how many of you, as children, kind of remember counting the senses on your hands? Like, I've got eyes, I've got ears, I've got a nose, I've got a mouth, and I've got skin. But then we have known about the kinesthetic sense for at least 50 years, and people have known about kinesthetic intelligence from the work of Howard Gardner and other somatic practices for at least another 30 years. But people aren't learning those words. Now, kinesthetic is hard to spell, and it's a little hard to understand because these are senses that have to do with paying attention to the body, to oneself. And we live in a society that doesn't value that as much. So I came up with this idea that maybe if we didn't just have 7 senses, which is proprioception and kinesthesia, the awareness of self is proprioception, our joints and our muscle tension, or the awareness of kinesthetics when we're moving and how we're moving. Maybe if we had 10 senses on 10 fingers, maybe we could make up a song, and I haven't found that composer yet to help me with it. Kids would learn about the internal senses, the senses of taking care of self. So I'll just go through those a little bit, but first, I'd like you to just notice how you're sitting or moving right now. And then I'd like you to change your position. So just alter it in some way. You can just shift your weight, you can lean over, whatever you want to do. And then I'd like you to go back to the first position. So that's the proprioceptive sense, knowing your body position, leaving it, and being able to return to it. How did you know to do that? Because your joints are registering in your brain, whether they're folded or extended, whether they're tilted right or left, all kinds of things like that. How tight your muscles are, how loose. So that's proprioception. So that's about knowing your tension level and your body shape. Those are the first 2 fingers. The other 3, I broke the kinesthetic up into the ability to know when you're moving at all, which is the inner ear reading acceleration and deceleration. Standing tall is knowing whether you're upright in alignment with gravity, also the inner ear helping with that. And I can go more into the anatomy and physiology of that another time, or in my book, it's there. And then tilting and falling. You know, the biggest cause of death in the elderly is actually a fall that leads to a sedentary lifestyle, then going into pneumonia. I mean, this is just exacerbating a kind of trend that exists in our society today, which is sedentary lifestyle. And it's considered the new smoking, meaning that it's a lifestyle pattern that kills. And actually, the latest data says more people die from sedentary lifestyle and its consequences than from cancer. So that's pretty powerful. So those are our 10 senses. In order to calm the nervous system, we might want to retreat from the external, or we might want to just be calmer in being externally alert. So these are the exterosensors that sense the world. And then we have the interoceptors, these proprioceptive and kinesthetic senses that read what's going on in our bodies. So the next few minutes, we're going to be playing with some things that involve closing our eyes and then opening them later and seeing what it's like to pay attention to our environment with a different bodily support, with a different level of grounding. So I'm gonna come back to gallery view so I can see more of you. I'll stop the share. And I just would love to find out if that sounds good, to do a little movement together. All right, looks like lots more people have come on. Lovely, so great.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs are up, fantastic. So it's your choice. You can stay seated upright, or if you have space in your home and or wherever you happen to be, and you want to lie down, that is perfectly fine. And I'm actually going to bring the Zoom camera, which is my little laptop, down to the floor so that we can be low to the ground. But again, I will start seated so you can watch a little bit. And then I will mostly be guiding you with words. So again, if you choose to close your eyes, that's totally fine. And if it becomes important to open your eyes, I'll suggest that. And of course, this is your exploration. You do the somatic process, which is following your own body wisdom. What I'm doing is just making suggestions. And then your body can really go where it needs to go. I don't think anything we're going to do today is triggering generally, but if you do find it is, would you please chat, and then Kelly can so graciously kind of alert me if someone is feeling like you're at all unsupported in this process. Because really we are a community, and even though we're online, the goal is to support one another, to be together, and for us to all feel healthier and stronger so that we can function as a community better. Okay. So we're going to start with the breath. And again, if it helps you to lie down with that, you can. I just want those of you that are sitting to have a model for just finding your back and breathing three-dimensionally. Which means if you have a chair behind you or a wall, that if you can feel that surface, so we are using the tactile exteroception of the skin to begin to feel ourselves. If you can just recall that the diaphragm, the thoracic diaphragm, that is at the low end of your rib cage, a big mushroom shape up under your ribs, isn't just to the front. So when we do belly breathing, that's great. But actually, our torsos are like a big cylindrical balloon. So breath is in all dimensions. When you blow up a balloon, it doesn't just fill in one direction. it equally fills from bottom to top, to the back and front, to the right and left, and then down to up. So that 3-part breathing, famous in yoga, is a great way to begin. And another way to begin is to simply notice how you are breathing, because breath is an automatic, autonomic function. And when we can deepen our breath, we are already calming the nervous system. And the best way to deepen the breath is to deepen the exhalation. Held breath is actually a vestige of some sort of stress. Shallow breathing can be functional. It works fine. But especially if it's habitual or it's coming up around stress, it's important to find deep diaphragmatic breathing so we really get rid of the toxins, which is a metaphor for any toxicity in our psychophysical experience. So I'm going to be quiet now and ask you to really, with a hiss if you like, which is the ideokinetic image of lengthening the breath, or just in silence through your nose if you prefer, deepen and lengthen your exhalation. I'd like you to continue with this deep breathing. I'm just going to make a few other suggestions that are other options, so you have choices. As you exhale, and this is influenced by my study of body-mind centering, the work of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, the exhalation can begin at the actual cellular level, allowing for the carbon dioxide that is no longer needed in every cell to really sponge out, like you're squeezing out a sponge, getting the fluid, which in this case is the blood, the venous blood, the blue blood, out of the cell, through the different capillaries, back up to the heart, so that the exhalations that we're doing through the lungs are truly cleansing. So you can pay attention to your lungs really deflating, your belly receding, the narrowing, the deflating of the balloon of your cylindrical torso or of the cylindrical lobes of the lungs, or the actual deflation of these little globular cells that are throughout your entire body. If you already know that there's a particular place in your body that either hurts or is holding tension or has sadness, this is a great time to go there and feel the cells just squeeze like a hug, sponge out the toxins, making room for fresh oxygen. We all want to get rid of free radicals and have better oxidative processes. We're eating better to do this. But we can also breathe more fully to do this. Some of the earliest somatic leaders cured themselves from tuberculosis by going deep into the alveoli, into the lungs, and into the cells of the body, the cells of the bones in the case of Gerda Alexander, to really change our bodily structure towards health. So you have a choice now to continue with the breathing process if that is feeling rich to you, or follow now some movement cues if you like. And the basic cue, whether you're seated or lying down or standing, is allowing yourself to go into a fetal curve of the spine, which means a C curve. It means going into flexion, letting your head just go, which is another way to kind of sponge out the breath, kind of get the blood moving to new parts. Movement moves fluids, it moves muscles, it moves cells. And I'm going to ask you to either hiss or again exhale through your nose and deepen your exhale as you deflate and fold. And when the inhale comes naturally, because you need more air, let it move you. So you might begin to extend your spine again. Maybe just an inch, maybe 5, maybe your whole spine. But just play now with folding in response to the exhalation and unfolding in response to the inhalation. There's no right or wrong what body part you lead with, whether it's your hips or your rib cage region or your neck or your head. You can experiment. Maybe it's the distal parts of your body together, the head and the tail, the pelvis. Maybe it's the middle. But just allow your core, your torso, your spine, your head and tail connection to follow the breath. Trust that with the deeper, deepest exhalation, there may be a pause, but an inhalation will come because you are alive. And ride that like you're riding a wave. Let it support your postural muscles. And let it bathe your adrenal glands on the top of your kidneys. It is the breath that is the best way to refuel an empty gas tank. The adrenals are our reserve system. And if we use up all that extra fuel, we need to just rest and breathe. That is why meditation has such a great physical as well as mental effect. So speaking of meditation, notice where your mind is going. How can you be gentler, more loving, more caring of yourself with any thoughts going through you? Maybe you want to add a sentence of self-care. Maybe you want to just love your breath. Appreciation underlies all conflict resolution. Even if it's agreeing to disagree, it's about respect. So I'm going to invite everybody to find a way to let the inhalation lead into a pretty big full body stretch. So it might take a while, but see if you can find almost a big X, whether you're sitting, lying down, or standing. You just want to get your feet to elongate away from your hips. your hands stretching, and then really curl. Maybe your head goes to your knees. Exhaling. I'm going to hiss. So now we're going to really ride the breath a little bit more. Maybe pay a little less attention to the breath itself. You can come back to this exploration and really find out how to use the breath honestly for a big opening. But now we're just practicing what it feels to have a big opening. And is this scary or is this fun? Just notice how it feels. And then what do you like or dislike about curling up? Take a moment to stay curled and see how it feels. Is it nourishing? Is it useful? Or does it feel scary or depressing? These are important, your relationship to these shapes. Ultimately, they're just movements, but we're loaded with different experiences and memories. So play with that. Similarly, what does it feel like to be huge? Does it feel scary? Does it feel confident? Does it feel just enlivening? You have your own words that make meaning of movement. And take 3 or 4 more of those. Just playing with the breath, supporting growing and shrinking. As you continue with this, and it can be smaller now, you can decide that you only want to be, just pick a place that felt most comfortable actually, whether it's more curled up or more stretched out, just see what feels best to you. And notice if you've chosen to keep your eyes open or closed. And notice if you feel ready to be a little more perceptive of the environment you're in. Listening to it. Does this position you've chosen feel like a great way to kind of be in the world, to be not only paying attention to your own body, but also alert to your environment? So allowing your hearing to scan. Your eyes could even be closed, or your eyes to scan if you prefer. Knowing that embryologically our eyes are connected to our skin, you can even listen through your skin. You can certainly feel if you're cold or hot, if the texture of what you're in contact with feels comfortable, hard or soft. What the pressure feels like in your body. So we're beginning to integrate interoception, your body sensation, your folding and your unfolding, your movement in space, your acceleration and deceleration, with your perception of being in the world. And again, I'd like you to register where you feel you're getting some nice juju, if you will, just something that feels useful to you. For me, it's often just curling up. I live in New York City and I need to just shut the world out sometimes. One of my favorite ways to do it is palming. So putting my palms, cupped palms on the heel of my hand on my cheekbone. So I invite you to join me in palming if that is feeling like a nice place to take care of your nervous system. On the other hand, if you're really enjoying just being open and receptive and looking with ease, with beginner's mind, with like a baby's curiosity, then continue with that. Or maybe you enjoyed having your eyes closed, but listening newly with fresh ears. Whatever you're doing, just notice what spinal positioning feels recuperative for you. Maybe it feels great to really arch after a day of sitting over a laptop or a desk or driving. Or maybe it feels good to just give in deeper to really letting the weight of the head go. Putting your head down on your knees, on the floor, on a pillow. It's important to give our body what it needs. So we've been moving the brain as if it's just a weighted organ, which is great because that's what it is. It's just part of the body. And sometimes our brains need to not be the in charge, hard-working parts. Of course, our brain is actually still working because the brainstem controls breath and is regulated by the pace of our breathing. And the cerebellum in the low brain is helping us from falling over even as we kind of heavily tilt forward or back or side to side. So we're giving our low brain nervous system a chance to express itself and to ground and to integrate. And giving our cortex, our cerebral hemispheres, a break, a rest. Our left brain, our right brain. Just let it ride, like we rode on the breath. Let your brain ride on your spinal cord. Like a flower in the wind, with the stem rooted through your sit bones, through your body surface that's in contact with wherever you are positioned. Just letting the head and its contents rock, relax, slow down, and yet still move. And then as you're ready, I'll be quiet for a minute now. You can start to move to stillness if you like, or if it's feeling great to keep moving, then just keep moving. I'm going to share a little anatomical information, hopefully in a kind of calm, easy way to just fill out what you've just experienced, which is that this slower rhythm that we've been with, and you know, at points you may have surged into a faster movement, but the tone of my voice has been more monotone or even phrasing, we call it in the Laban work. And that is the rhythm of the cerebral spinal fluid. If any of you have ever had a cranial sacral session, it's moving the dural sac that is the container, the bag around the central nervous system, the spinal cord and brain, and is filled from the flowing of the fluid from the ventricles around the brain, nourishing the brain, and then down through to L2, lumbar spine 2, around the spinal cord. So much of what I've been doing is talking us through, albeit a little fast, it could be even slower, the rhythm of the cerebral spinal fluid. In our work in dynamic embodiment, again, sourced from body-mind centering, we call that the fluid of movement meditation. So very important in calming the nervous system and slowing down the breath. And just a reminder, we worked with deepening the breath, deepening the release of toxins, refueling the adrenal glands, exploring some very primitive movement patterns, that of just becoming a fetus again, early embryonic shape. Hopefully resting there a little bit. And then we could go much, much slower, but exploring the process of the first, we can no longer say first year of life. It's really the 9 months of growth in utero, and then the 12 to 14 months of coming upright and sitting and standing. And becoming more individuated, where we have to stand on our own, which of course can feel scary sometimes. So it's nice to be able to go back, not just back to the fetal curve, but even, and we did a little bit of this kind of rocking or swaying, which is like being back in the amniotic flow of being held, of being contained, of being taken care of. And we can give this to ourselves. We all had a yoke, and we all had amnion around us, protecting us. So we always have a memory of the yoke as a source of nourishment, and the amnion around us as a source of protection. So even just carrying that image while you're upright, I often will just think about the amnion as being there, something I can rest back into, to be able to be more out in the world with a sense of peace. So I don't know if it would feel helpful to have 1 minute in a breakout session, or whether you're just happy where you are, or if you all want to send me a chat note, that would be kind of wonderful.
Martha, could I suggest that we do a chat note, because we've come actually to the end of our teaching time now.
Great. So just a quick chat note minute maybe would be great. Which is taking your experience into language, and how do you carry this experience into being with a computer? Because we have to do a lot of that these days. And Kelly, if you would save the chat notes and send them to me, I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, it's going to be too many to read, so I'm going to just delight in them. But we could look, sure.
I'll save the chat.
Thank you.
There's a question.
Yeah, usually there's a sidebar for that.
Oh yeah, it should pop up.
Okay, thanks so much.
Lots of very positive messages coming in. Incredible guided meditation, the most amazing I've ever experienced. And deeply soothing.
You know, I'm someone that really feeds off of human beings. So it's been great to see your faces. And for those of you that have chosen to not be on the video, I totally appreciate that. I've done a lot of it during this conference myself. But so thank you. I felt your presence. I felt you with me so that I felt at ease sharing with all of you.
Martha, on behalf of everyone, I really want to thank you from the depth of my being, and I'm sure our collective beings, for this wonderful opportunity to learn more about what you have taught and what you've been researching and your experimentation. It's just really a wonderful offering to this conference. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment for your top embodiment tip, but first I'm going to do my duty and just put a few things in the chat window. One is to let everyone know that there's a partner charity to this embodiment conference, the Queer Facilitator course for LGBTQ+ Russia. And there's donations that are happening. There's a link there that I just stuck in the chat. And I was just made aware that Mark Walsh is personally matching every donation that is made today. It's to try to make this these kind of trainings available to communities who really don't have good access but could really use the training. If you probably are all really aware, but to access the recordings, which will be available for 1 week following the course, I've just cut and pasted the link in there. You'll be able to see the recordings as well as the conference schedule. And if the conference was way too much, then you could actually watch, and you're really keen on either seeing things again or having lifelong access. Here's the link to buy the package. It's I think 200 euros, but it's half price for the duration of the conference. So 99 euros is the price for now. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to you for your top embodiment tip, Martha.
So that's really tricky. Yeah, there's my real belief is that everybody is so unique that we have to follow our own wisdom. And so I guess my invitation is to follow the sensation in your body, especially around the emotional experiences you have, and to see, perhaps with a good friend, a family member, someone you feel safe with, if you can explore noting shifts and periods of either anxiety or nervousness or fear, those sensations that make us feel like we have to calm down our nervous system, and see if you can follow the sensation to understand the feeling enough to then dare to ask for what you need from a friend, to practice that. I had to do it with my daughter today. It wasn't easy, but it helped. We ended up, cheerfully in acknowledgement of each other. And it felt great. I can't remember, am I allowed to share some of the resources that I...
Sure, do you have something you can cut and paste into the chat?
And I just have pictures, like this is our studio in New York City. It's called studio55c.org. So if you're in New York and you want to visit live, here we are. But we also, I teach dance classes called Body Mind Dancing, and people can zoom into the studio. So that's the schedule. This one is listed more through my dynamic embodiment work, which is includes body mind dancing as one of the ways to learn to be a movement therapist, a registered somatic movement therapist. So the dynamic embodiment program will actually have 5 days in Ireland in July, and we are meeting in Arizona in March, and those are open workshops to the public. And then in terms of social somatics, this is our free nonprofit. We also have a fundraiser today because it's Giving Tuesday in the United States. But it's always here, and they're free classes right here at our studio. They're open to everyone. Originally, this was designed for people with cancer, and now it's for older adults and anyone concerned about healthy lifestyle and preventing cancer. And last thing is just kind of fun, our studio also has kind of a gallery. So if anybody has an art show that they'd like to hang and do a fundraiser with us or something, that's a lot of fun too. So we have yoga here and other practices as well. So come visit.
Thank you so much, Martha. Somebody's asking for your website URL again. If you tell it to me, I'll just type it in and then we'll wrap.
Great. So one of the things I did at the very beginning, the first entry on the chat was drmarthaeddy.com. And it's actually like a index page for about 10 different websites I'm involved with.
Okay, I'll just
So everything from embodypeace.org, which was my doctoral research, to the Center for Kinesthetic Education, which is my work in the public schools with kids, doing professional development with teachers, to Studio 55C, to Global Water Dances, environmental work. So come check it out, including links to buying the book, you know, all of that.
Excellent. Thank you so, so much. Now I am going to keep the room open for another 15 minutes for our coffee break if people want to hang around. Martha, I'm sure everyone would be delighted if you were able to join us and if you wanted to join us. But I'm going to formally end the session now and thank you once again.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thanks to Mark and Daniela too. It's been a pleasure working with you specifically, Kelly.
Thank you, Martha.